Hello, I'm Matthias Martins. Welcome back to this reading of How to Do Things with Stories. We're on to Chapter 7, Choosing Symbols. So far, we have looked at storytelling as a vessel for challenging lessons. But we have left aside the question of what these lessons might be. We have assumed that the writer is coming to the page with an intended effect, or at least with something that she knows she wants to convey, an experience, a value, a state of mind. With the core effect or message already assumed, we can focus entirely on the task of building a story around it. But a story is never just a vehicle for a message. We have already seen that the most powerful tool a storyteller has is ambiguity. And the effect of ambiguity is unpredictable by its nature. In fact, not only is it unpredictable, but it only becomes more unpredictable as it grows more powerful, as it shakes deeper and deeper foundations in the reader's mind. Powerful, stirring writing is even harder to tame and guide toward a goal than bland prose. But it is not only the reader whose experience is hard to control. The writer, too, may feel like a potter whose clay bucks and slips at her grip. Even working with intense, singular focus, she finds that the work fails to conform to her vision. Under her very eyes, it takes on a shape that she did not intend. If writers rejected every work that followed this path, very little of value would be published. Even when the creative process leads somewhere unexpected, it is still possible to produce valuable work. It is even possible to produce work whose impact lies somewhat close to the writer's intention. If writers rejected every work that followed this path, very little of value would be published. Even when the creative process leads somewhere unexpected, it is still possible to produce valuable work. It is even possible to produce work whose impact lies somewhat close to the writer's intention. But an artist must have humility. An artist must yield somewhat to the unexpected twists and turns that emerge in her own creative process. The stronger the impact the artist intends, the more humility she will need to achieve it. Why is it like this? In part, because the writer really has at least two modes: the writer as writer and the writer as reader. Each negotiates with the other to create a story. Each has their own tastes and needs. The unfolding story bounces back and forth between them, sometimes with unexpected flares of violence. The writer owns the story when putting words on the page. The writer as reader owns the story when she reads those words back and feels the image they create. The writer as reader weighs the image against her vision, her plan, how she wants the story to be received by her audience. The writer as reader may decide that sweeping changes are required to get the story back on track. But in order to make those changes, she must slip back into the mode of writer as writer, or writer as editor, which has the same problems. And as a writer, with her head down, composing sentences, she may look up after an hour to find that she has gotten even farther away from where she intended to go. The process is similar to that of a painter. Pursuing her vision, the painter puts a few flecks of paint on the canvas and examines them for resemblance to her intention. She follows no blueprint. She adds a stroke here, a stroke there, examines it from one angle, then another. Through endlessly repeated cycles of guessing and checking, she begins to arrive at something that approaches her intention. Or perhaps it simply approaches something pleasing, and that is enough. But if, in this endlessly repeating cycle, the painter rejected anything that did not precisely match her original vision, she would abandon any chance of completing her painting. Not only that, She would abandon a large part of the value of art to humanity. At its core, creative art is a foray into the unknown. We cannot create great art and at the same time know what we are doing. Only when we've experienced our art from the side of the audience can we perceive the significance of it. But that only happens after we've done the work of the artist. What we create in the dark. The focus of this book has not been on greatness in art. Instead, we focus on art that is highly effective, that changes minds, that does things. Yet there is a great deal of overlap between the two. Perhaps we can even see great art like this. It is art that portrays a complete, total worldview and pulls the reader in to that worldview. Seen in this way, great art is triumphant in its effectiveness. Whether one hopes for greatness or not, there are lessons to be learned from great art that apply to all art. One of these is that a story always presents a worldview to the reader. We can imagine a worldview as a canvas that the author stretches as far as she can. As she stretches it in one direction, it retracts in other directions. She will need great strength to simultaneously touch all the poles of experience. To the extent that she manages to do it, her work presents a total worldview. What exactly are these poles of experience? We might want to name them in many different ways. For our purposes here, let's name them like this: want and abundance, hope and despair, love and alienation, the familiar and the unknown. It is relatively easy to build a story that hits just one of these extremes. It is relatively easy to make a comedy of impossible triumphs, or a drama of corrupt intent and endless calamity. What is difficult is to combine experiences that push us to every extreme, experiences that make us feel desperate for warmth and overflowing with joy, electrified by the promise of the future and dreading the sunrise, dissolved in the surrender of love and shattered against a wall of strangerhood, in command of all one sees and stupefied by colossal mystery. To run this zodiac of experience in the company of a storyteller is to be changed. It is to have the mark of the story set indelibly on one's heart. If a story only manages to make readers feel happy, readers will take it as a guide to happiness. If it makes them feel grief, it will be a guide to grief. But if it manages to comprehend the whole range of human experience, it may become a reader's guide to life. As a story approaches this ideal, from the perspective of a certain reader, that reader will be more and more powerfully moved. He will feel more connections to the story. The impressions it leaves will last longer in his mind. All of this is possible because in some way the story has become real to him. He is maximally open to making the message of the story a part of his reality. Let's consider this from the perspective of a writer with a specific mission. As an example, let's consider a writer who wants free love to take over the world. She wants a world where all barriers around love and sex are broken, where there is no longer any shame around any kind of partnership, and all are free to love whomever they want. The question we're asking is, how can this writer best work toward her chosen goal? If this writer were intending to address only those who already share in her goal, her themes might address lessons that would improve life for communities who already love each other as freely as possible. Her characters might model positive lifestyles in a free love world, or they might depict the struggles of these communities within a broader, disapproving society. But what if her intention were to write for people who do not see free love as a good idea? How could she write a story to effectively persuade a skeptical reader? Let's consider one option. Our writer tells a story where everything goes right. Everyone in her imagined free love world is happy. No one gets hurt or sick. If anything does go wrong, it's because of someone who rejects the principles of free love, who attempts to revive the old world of shame and self-denial. How compelling is this to a skeptical reader? Most likely, such a story will fail to achieve the intended effect. Without tragedy, uncertainty, and heartbreak, the people of the community will fail to seem real. If the reader opposes free love, it's probably because he fears what might go wrong with it in and of itself. In order for the writer to have any hope of persuading this reader, she must be able to show him the community at its worst. She must show him this community when its members are in the depths of loneliness, of confusion, of dissatisfaction with themselves and each other. Only then, at the meeting point between the writer's creative vision and the reader's worst fears, can she hope to guide him into a different perspective. This is not to say that the world of a story must be full of suffering, that it cannot present ideals, unattainable worlds, unattainable lives that nonetheless paint a portrait of something good and beautiful. But such stories are only effective when they map those ideals onto the real thoughts, feelings, and memories of readers. A world can be populated with ideals and yet not be free from pain. And if it is to maximize its effect on a potential reader, it ought not be free from pain. When we are painting a portrait of an ideal world, our goal must be to create clarity about our message. The goal should not be to remove obstacles that in real life are inconvenient to that message, because removing them in fantasy does not remove them in reality. It is possible to tell certain stories more effectively, with idealized characters and worlds full of fantastical shortcuts, but in order to have the intended effect, the writer can't ignore the constraints that her readers will be aware of in their real lives. The constraints of life constrain the messages that an artist can send. What is not true in reality cannot be truthfully expressed in stories. However, by the same law, what is true in reality may be truthfully expressed in even the most fantastical of fiction. I've been Matthias Martens. Thank you so much for joining me for this reading from How to Do Things with Stories. Stay tuned for Chapter 8, When to Make Sense.